I was 22, and my life was a study in beige. I worked in the basement of the university library, a place that smelled of old paper and dust, restoring antique books. It was a quiet job for a quiet person. I would spend hours meticulously repairing torn pages with Japanese tissue paper, restitching bindings with waxed linen thread, and tooling leather covers with heated brass stamps. The world outside the thick ground-level windows was a distant hum, a life I was observing rather than participating in. My days were a predictable rhythm of gentle decay and careful restoration, a cycle that felt both profound and profoundly dull. I was a ghost in the machine of the university, a silent caretaker of forgotten knowledge. One afternoon, a man I'd never seen before descended the stone steps into my subterranean world. He was old, with a cascade of white hair and a tweed jacket that seemed to have been tailored for a much larger man. He clutched a worn leather briefcase to his chest like a life preserver. He introduced himself as Alistair Finch and explained that he had a book he hoped I could restore. From his briefcase, he produced a volume wrapped in what looked like oilcloth. It was a large, heavy tome, its leather cover cracked and peeling, the pages within yellowed and brittle. The title, stamped in faded gold leaf, was A Compendium of Local Fauna, but the author's name was smudged beyond recognition. The book had a strange, almost medicinal smell, a mixture of camphor and something else, something vaguely metallic. The pages were filled with detailed, hand-drawn illustrations of animals, some familiar, others fantastical. There were birds with too many wings, fish with human-like hands, and mammals with reptilian scales. It was a bestiary of a world that didn't exist, or perhaps one that had been forgotten. I told him I could certainly try to repair it. He seemed immensely relieved. "It's a family heirloom," he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper.
"It's very important to me." He came back every other day that week to check on my progress, hovering over my shoulder as I worked, his breath smelling of cloves and something else I couldn't quite place. He was full of stories about the book, about his family, about the town's history. He claimed that his great-grandfather, the book's author, had been a student of the unseen, a man who could perceive the hidden world that lay just beyond our own. He said the creatures in the book were not imaginary, but real, and that they still roamed the wild places of the world, hidden from our mundane eyes. About a month later, I decided to take up bird watching. It was an excuse to get out of my apartment, to force myself to interact with the world beyond the library walls. I bought a pair of binoculars and a field guide and started spending my weekends at the local nature preserve, a sprawling tract of marshland and forest on the edge of town. On my third visit, I saw a familiar figure on the path ahead of me, Alistair Finch, his tweed jacket and leather briefcase a stark contrast to the surrounding greenery. He was peering intently at a flock of geese through a pair of ancient-looking brass binoculars. He spotted me, and his face lit up. "The book restorer," he exclaimed. "I didn't know you were an ornithologist." I confessed that I was a novice. He insisted on taking me under his wing, pointing out different species, explaining their calls, their nesting habits, their migratory patterns. He was incredibly knowledgeable, and his passion was infectious. I found myself looking forward to our weekend encounters. He taught me to see the world in a new way, to notice the subtle details I had always overlooked, the way a hawk circles its prey, the way a sparrow builds its nest, the way the light filters through the leaves of the trees. He made the world feel more alive, more vibrant, more magical. But then his behavior began to change.
He started bringing me gifts he'd found in the preserve, a strangely shaped stone that was warm to the touch, a bird's nest that he claimed was woven with human hair, a collection of feathers that he said were from a bird not listed in any field guide. The feathers were iridescent, shifting from green to purple to blue in the light. They were beautiful and unsettling at the same time. He started talking about the Watchers in the Woods, a secretive group of people who, he claimed, lived in the preserve and practiced ancient pagan rituals. He said they were the true natives of this land and that the town had been built on their sacred ground. He claimed that the creatures from his great-grandfather's book were their familiars, their spirit animals, their gods. He started visiting me at the library more frequently, but he was no longer interested in the compendium. He wanted me to research the history of the preserve, to find old maps and land deeds that might prove his theories. He was convinced that the Watchers were trying to communicate with him, that they had chosen him to be their emissary to the outside world. He wanted me to use my archival skills to uncover the truth that had been hidden by the town's founders. My supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Gable, warned me to keep my distance. "That man is a crank," she said. "Don't let him drag you into his fantasies." She told me that Alistair had been a regular at the library for years, always with a new obsession, a new conspiracy theory. She said he had been a history professor at the university once, but had been forced to retire after a series of incidents. I tried to create some space between us, but Alistair was persistent. He started leaving things on the windshield of my car, crudely drawn maps of the preserve with certain areas circled in red, newspaper clippings about missing pets and unsolved disappearances, and once, a small, crudely carved wooden effigy of a bird. The effigy was disturbing. It was made of a dark, gnarled wood, and its eyes were two small black stones that seemed to follow me.
I was becoming genuinely frightened. He knew my car, my workplace, my weekend hobby. I felt like I was constantly being observed, that his presence was a shadow I couldn't shake. I started having nightmares, dreams of being lost in the woods, of being chased by unseen things. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, the smell of cloves and camphor in my nostrils. The breaking point came on a cold, drizzly evening in late autumn. I was locking up the library when Alistair's car, a vintage Volvo that was more rust than paint, screeched to a halt in front of the building. He leaned out the window, his face pale and his eyes wild. "They've shown me," he hissed, "the heart of it all. You have to see it." He was more agitated than I had ever seen him. Against my better judgment, I got in the car. The sense of dread was a physical weight in my chest, but I couldn't bring myself to say no. The inside of his car was a mess, littered with old books, maps, and strange dried herbs. The air was thick with the smell of cloves and damp wool. He drove us to the preserve, the tires crunching on the gravel path as we entered the darkening woods. He led me down a narrow, overgrown trail I had never seen before, the branches of the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the last of the fading light. We came to a clearing, and in the center stood a massive, ancient oak tree, its branches twisted into grotesque shapes. The base of the tree was covered in carvings, strange symbols that seemed to wriggle in the gloom, and hanging from the branches were dozens of small wooden effigies, just like the one he had left on my car. The air was heavy and still, the silence broken only by the sound of our own breathing. "This is their temple," he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of reverence and terror. "And this," he said, pointing to a large, flat stone at the base of the tree, "is their altar." On the stone was a fresh carving, a crude stick figure, and next to it, my name. "They know who you are," he said, turning to me, his eyes wide with a terrifying, manic glee. "They've chosen you. You're to be the sacrifice." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a long, curved knife, its blade glinting in the faint light. "They demand a tribute," he said, his voice dropping to a low, guttural growl. "A life for a life." I didn't wait to hear any more. I turned and ran, the sound of his laughter echoing through the trees. I didn't look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, my heart pounding in my ears. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the main road, where I flagged down a passing motorist and used their phone to call the police. They found Alistair still at the oak tree, chanting in a language they didn't recognize. He was taken into custody and later committed to a psychiatric hospital. The police discovered that he had a long history of mental illness and had been living in a delusional world for years. The Compendium, it turned out, was just an old, forgotten book he had found in a thrift store. The Watchers in the woods were a figment of his imagination. But the fear he had instilled in me was real. The knife was real. The terror was real. I left the library. I sold my binoculars. I don't go to the preserve anymore. The world feels less safe now, less beige. I know that madness can wear a friendly face, that a quiet life can be shattered in an instant, and sometimes when the wind rustles the leaves in a certain way, I can still hear Alistair's laughter,
and I have to remind myself that it's just the wind. It's just the wind. But sometimes I'm not so sure. Sometimes I can still smell the cloves and the camphor, and I wonder if the watchers in the woods are still out there, waiting.